Hi, everybody. I'm glad you're back, or if this is the first time you've seen us today. We again have another part of our series, The Black Family Representation, Identity, and Diversity. And we have wonderful life stories from people in our community. We are learning so much about everyone. And today I'm personally excited about our next guest because he is from Louisiana and I'm from Louisiana. So you are in for an amazing life story. He's also here with his wife. This is Mr. Wilmer Birt and his wife, Grace Burke, but she informed me she was going to say hi and she was going to run.
Yeah.
So before I get started, if you would like to have credit for attending this, make sure you go to the library website to the events section and register. I'm not going to take up the time though. I'm going to go ahead and let Mr. Burt get started. So welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Burt,
Thank you.
and the floor is now yours.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Uh, Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted you to meet my lovely wife of only 54 years. She looks much younger than that, and so do I. But wanted you to meet Grace Birt personally. She's a very special person in my life, and we have two wonderful sons together and six grandchildren that we're just so proud of. So this is my wife. She's going to have to leave us right now, and hopefully that I will be able to share some things. First, I want to start off by saying, giving a special thanks to Cynthia and the entire CDT staff for putting this on. I think it's long overdue, and hopefully it will be as rewarding to the receivers as it is for those who will be presenting. I've looked at the list, and there's been some really very, very special people, and some of which I know personally, and hopefully we'll be able to connect some things about growing up in the South and what that was like for me. Okay, very good. First, I want to tell you a little bit about me. I was born in a little town called Sibley, Louisiana, very way up north. I know that's far distance from where Cynthia was born and raised, but it was a very rural community, and we were in a very agricultural type of setting there. And matter of fact, we were what's called sharecroppers. And by that, we mean that we used the land, which we did not own, and from what we were able to raise and harvest, we paid for the use of the land. Sometimes we paid for it by the proceeds that we got from selling cotton at the gin, and sometimes the owners of the land just wanted us to do clearing and other kinds of things like that. But it was a very, very, very humble type of beginning. Um, my youngest brother and I grew up together about since we were only 2 years apart in age. I am the ninth of 10 children. The first three were stillborn. So actually, there was only seven that I knew anything about. Um, the way that this thing worked for us was my parents were so, uh, uh, shall I say, they insisted that we were not going to have to live off the land and do things that way, that we were going to get an education. And they were going to do everything that they possibly could. And the way that you will see a lot of the black families in the South during that time, they were normally very big families. And the big families were there because, in a way, it provided the workforce. because we were working the land. Everything that we did, everything we ate, everything we grew. There were very few things that we actually bought from the store. We grew fresh vegetables, we corn, we grew watermelons, we grew cotton, we grew it all. We had livestock, we had chickens, and all of that made up what we ate and what we did. If we didn't grow it, we didn't eat it. It is as simple as that. My dad furnished fresh vegetables for the local merchants in the area, and that was another way of having cash income instead of um, just the other kind of things that we grew. Uh, my younger brother and I, we we were always into something, you know, uh, and usually it got one of or both of us a good whipping. And my parents were not adverse to using the rod on us when it was necessary. And unfortunately, I have to admit, it was necessary too much of the time because we were always doing something or not doing something that we were supposed to have done. But we grew up and as a family, and that was so important to us. Family was so critically important to us in everything that we did. And we were very close as we talked through things like the church and the education. You will find that many times, many of the people who were involved were in one way or another related to us. Um, we grew up with family, and we went to school with family. We went to church with family. We celebrated with family, and it was all such a wonderful thing. We were happy. We didn't know that we had nothing, but we were happy folks. I want to start also by sharing with you um, how I got involved with the family heritage and being, I guess, the person who was responsible for writing down the heritage of our family and trying to memorialize it so that it could be there as a reference for our children, our grandchildren, and our great grandchildren. I told you a little bit about me, but let me tell you a little bit more before I go ahead. Um, I went to a one room schoolhouse, and the one room schoolhouse was provided by my grandparents on my father's side, and actually, it was named the Birt School. We lived in a parish. In Louisiana, they don't have counties, they have parishes. And we lived in Webster Parish. So after my folks provided the land, Webster Parish built us a school. It was a one room schoolhouse and it provided education for grades 1 through 5. Um, there was no kindergarten at that time. The parish also provided us with a teacher. My first teacher I remember well, her name is Mrs. Mary Moore, and she, like the other things in the other traditions, she did not spare the rod. She did not mind cracking us on the knuckles if we did not do the right thing. She basically taught us the 3 R's. Yeah, with that, there may have been 12 to 15 students in the classroom, but she had to teach to 5 different grades. And I was one of those that was so eager to go to school. I wanted to go even before I was old enough. I had older brothers and sisters who attended the school, and I begged and I begged and begged to go to school with them. And I started attending Birt School, not as a student, but just because I wanted to go at the age of 4. And I found that I picked up on a lot of the things I was able to write the letters and do figuring and learn how to read and all of that before I became a first grader. So I was kind of ahead of the curve in that regard, as you might say. Um, and then at that particular school, it had it was so interdependent. Uh, the parents of the community had to provide the wood for the stove. They had to take care of any issues um, concerning the building, anything that. So the men got together and they provided all of those services. At the beginning, the lunch that we had was a brown bag lunch that we brought from home, and it was usually um, leftover breakfast items or something, you know. But it varied, based on what we had available at the time. It was not till a couple of years later that they did hire a cook and Mrs. Bessie Gazaway, I'll never forget her, was the cook that they hired, and she uh, did all of the cooking. We provided, the parents provided the wood and kept it stocked like that. And for once, we started getting meals that were pretty well balanced in not just leftover things. And certainly that was something that we enjoyed very much. And after at my fifth grade year, they did build a school that was dedicated to the one-room schoolhouses, and I think there were about five of them in the area, uh, called Central Consolidated High School. Central Consolidated High School. Central Consolidated High School was grade 1 through uh, 12, 1 through 12. So I went to Central Consolidated High School as a sixth grader. And to staff the school, uh, they brought in the teachers that they had hired for the one room schoolhouses to make up the basics of it. But by and large, they were mostly the elementary grade teachers. It was then that we started getting in some of the young folks who had just graduated from schools like Grambling State University and some as far south as Southern University uh, as teachers. And we got a chance to start experiencing some of the other disciplines like biology and chemistry and the more advanced math uh, because they were prepared to do that kind of stuff. Quite frankly, many of the teachers in the one room schoolhouses were not college graduates, but they may have had a high school 12th grade completion, but they did a good job of getting us ready with the basic fundamentals. So my first high school, we were bused. Um, I would say it was probably 10 miles from our homes to this new school that had been built for us um, and was composed of only black students. We were bused past two beautiful schools that were dedicated to whites only. And they were totally segregated in every way. The only contact I think that we may have had with them was that the books that had been dedicated to those schools were passed down to Central Consolidated High School. Well, I went to Central and I got involved. I mean, first time I'd ever ridden a bus, you know, but it was a long ride uh, up and back. And when we got back home, we had chores to do. So it was a long day. Any way you look at it, it was a long day. But I got involved in the academics because I had that early start. I was not much of an athlete as far as basketball goes. I played and I actually did qualify and was named to the high school varsity basketball team as a junior in high school. as a junior in high school, and I was on the team my junior year and my senior year. But to show you how I fit in that whole scheme of things, we'd have tournaments and things on Saturday or during the weekends, and we went to one tournament, and I had a very nice pair of Converse All Star tennis shoes that I had gotten some kind of way from working and getting them. And we got to the tournament, and one of our star players had forgotten his shoes. So the coach came to me and said, "Hey, Bert, I know that you're ready to play and everything, but I need to borrow your tennis shoes, and so that our star player can have some shoes and be able to play in the game." I was hurt very deeply, but for the sake of the team, I relented and I went ahead and let the other player use my tennis shoes to play. Now, if that isn't something, but we won. We won the game, and I think we also won the tournament thanks to my Converse All Stars. Not my favorite sport was baseball. I had a pretty good arm, and matter of fact, I my wife's giving me a signal at the door. As a matter of fact, my senior year in high school, I had a very good record. Uh, I was 3-1, and I only lost to the team that won the state championship that year. So yeah, I did very well there. Um, my principal took a strong liking to me, and his name was Mr. Mullen. He was a kind of a short, roly-poly guy, and of course the kids laughed at him because of his little pudgy stomach. And when he walked, he kind of blew his lips and made a noise blowing his lips. But the man was very, very smart. He was very ingenious in keeping that school running. And he took such a strong interest in me that when he would go away for the day at a meeting of the local principals of the schools, he would take me with him. I don't even know if he asked my parents' permission, but he would load me up in his truck and we'd drive approximately 10 miles to Minden, Louisiana. And all along the way, Mr. Mullen would question me. He would ask me every question he could think of. And I prided myself in being able to answer every question that this man asked. But if he asked me even one question that I could not answer, he would look at me and say, "Boy," he said, "you think you're smart. You don't know nothing." And it would just crush my bubble. It wasn't until later on that I understood what he was saying to me, that maybe I had a little book knowledge, but there was so much more to know. And boy, did I learn that lesson well. Well, I was able to graduate from Central Consolidated High School as the class valedictorian in a class of 19 seniors. Yay! And as my cousin said at my retirement, I was related to most of them. That's not true. I was not related to that many. Maybe one or two, but not that many. So upon graduating from Central Consolidated High School, I was interested in going to Southern University because I was familiar with that school. As a part of the programs that were offered to us in high school, there was something called the LAILO, Louisiana Association of Interscholastics, and it was more like an academic competition. And all of the high schools, black high schools throughout the state, sent students there to compete in various disciplines: mathematics, biology, chemistry, and there was a music competition. And I participated 1 year in the math competition and 1 year in biology. And each year, since I had such an interest in music, um, I sang in a quartet that competed, and also they had a huge um, mass choir that they put together that was directed by one of the professors at Southern University, Dr. Dorsey. Such a sound I had never experienced in my life. You can imagine 300 voices all together and being trained well in how to sing the parts that they were supposed to sing. And anyway, that was part of the competition. So I was familiar with Southern because I got to attend the LAILO 3 years actually. The 1 year that I competed statewide in biology, I think I came in sixth overall, which I was very, very, very proud of being able to do that. But the school and the atmosphere really uh, piqued my interest in returning to Southern, even though Southern was 250 miles away from home. When I graduated from high school, uh, it was a tough move. I mean, I'd never been that far away from home before, and it was quite an adjustment to be able to do that. I remember well that when I got ready to leave, I I was actually playing piano for my little church, Union Church, and I'm going to tell you more about that religious experience a little bit later on. But they everybody was crying because I was leaving, and they took up a little collection for me as I went out the door, and I think it was $12.50 going off to college. Uh, yeah, but I was so proud of that $12 in that day in 1960. $12.50 probably went quite a distance for us. But anyway, I was overjoyed and thrilled at having had that opportunity at that church. And well, I'll tell later how I got to be the pianist at that church. That's another whole story. But I went off to Southern University, packed my little brown bag and whatever I had, and went off down there. And everything had been set up for me. Uh, the dormitories that I would be living in, and all of that. But I found that the staff there, the teaching staff, did not just educate to the academics. They took a very, very strong interest in us as individuals, where we came from, what we were going through, and helped us in every way possible. Actually, I got to go to college because I qualified for what was called a T.H. Harris Scholarship. And also, I had a national defense loan, which, of course, loan means you pay it back. But there was a local scholarship that was given by the Webster Parish Educators Association, which they gave to a deserving student who was going off to college. I was able to win that scholarship, and $300. $300 was putting all of that together, helped me pay my way into college. Um, the first year at Southern University was a learning year. I was so dedicated to making sure that I made my parents proud of me with my grades and everything. And actually, I did pretty well. But to show you what I mean by the interest of the staff, the department chair, I had declared a major with the education department. At the end of the first quarter, I had two A's, a B, and two C's on my report card. I got called into the office by the director of the education department, and this man literally scolded me because he wanted me to understand that I was not just there to be a mathematician, but I was there to be an educated individual. And he felt that being the valedictorian of my class coming out of high school, that I should have been doing better across the board. Well, I took that. I took that to heart, and I used his advice and his scolding to make sure that I did everything that I needed to do to be successful in college. One of my experiences that I need to share, because I was valedictorian of my high school, I was put in what was called Val Sal honors classes. And with some of the brightest brains, I tell you, as I found out throughout the state, in a United States history class, we were studying the colonies, and I was used to being able to read and record or check yes, no, or fill in the blank for the most part. I can say that I was not that good at analytical studies. But when one of the classes, the teacher stood up and he said to this young man from Mansfield, Louisiana, he said, "Would you please stand to the floor and put forth the argument that a representative to the Continental Congress would put forth if he was from the state of Rhode Island?" I said, "What? What are you asking me to do?" Well, he stood up and he knew that the state of Rhode Island had certain issues that they would want to put forth. And he did it, and I said to myself, boy, are you in over your head. But I made the adjustments. I studied hard. I even studied on Fridays after school was, I was in the library, just trying to make things happen. Well, um, another thing about college was, the money was a little narrow, so I pretty much had to work my way through. Um, I remember the first job I had at Southern University uh, was tending boiler rooms. And tending boiler rooms, you had to go to the boiler rooms at midnight and check to make sure that they weren't overheating and things like that. It didn't take long to do it, but I had 4 or 5 stops. But I was happy to do it because I was making a little extra money. And then next, I worked for the campus security, directing traffic, whatever, for the events that they had on the college campus. And then finally, I got a chance to work in the campus security office because I had learned how to type in high school. Uh, they had me in that office, and I was typing up warrants. I mean, tickets for violations on campus. Um, and after I got to my sophomore year, the end of my sophomore year, and qualified for advanced course ROTC, I readily took it because they paid me $27.50 a month to keep my uniforms looking nice. And of course, it didn't cost that much to do it, but I had a little extra money to spend. And when things really got tough or I didn't have enough money, I could always call my older sister Rosetta, who had graduated from Tuskegee Institute, Alabama, as a nurse and was working at the VA there. And so she had a job. And basically, that's the way it worked. I started telling you about the man force there. And what we did was the younger ones would work the fields so that the older ones could go to college. My older sister, Rosetta, um, her story of how she got to college simply blew my mind when she told me how it happened. When she graduated from high school, um, she wanted to be a nurse. And there was no school in the state of Louisiana that would let her go to nursing school because they were not integrated at that time. The state of Louisiana was really tough about things like that, and under no conditions would she be able to attend one of the colleges there that offered nursing. So the state of Louisiana basically had to pay for her to go to Tuskegee Institute to study nursing, where she did. She graduated from the nursing school, and she went to work at the VA there in Tuskegee, and she went to Meharry College and got an advanced degree in nursing. Um, and so I would call her and say, "Hey, Rosette, I need a little more money. Are they going to send me home or whatever the situation would be?" And she always obliged me. Okay. All right. I'm looking at my notes because I really want to kind of lay this thing out in a way that makes sense, basically. We talked about early beginnings, and then we kind of moved through the schooling right on up to, I'm now at Southern University and in college. But there's some other things that I just really need to share. One has to do with how faith played out in me getting to the point where I am now. My wife is trying to let me know that, look, you got to move a little faster because you got a lot of material and you're running out of time, boy. But anyway, we were all raised and went to a small church, a CME, Christian Methodist Episcopal Church called Union CME. It was a small church. I don't think they had ever had more than like 30 members. But that church did so much to prepare us for life in general. My dad was the superintendent of the Sunday school class. We had what they call a traveling minister that went from church to church. We had church on the first Sunday of the month, but we had Sunday school every Sunday. And the Sunday school teachers, my cousin Mattie B. Adele and Gertrude Hill and all of those folks, um, really spent time with us. And a lot of what they taught us about the Bible and about right and wrong, but they taught us about good manners and not chewing gum when we were not supposed to, and all of these things. They put on plays for us. I remember I was in a play called The Crucifixion, and of course they picked me to play the part of Peter, you know. And when Christ was talking to the disciples in the upper room, and he was declaring that someone would betray him. My line was, "Lord, is it I?" Well, for the bread that was being broken, they gave us cake, and boy, did I love cake. So when it time for me to say, "Lord, is it I had so much cake in my mouth until it came out some kind of garble thing. "Gog, is it I" or something. But they teased me forever about that. But it was a wonderful experience. Out of that little church, two became ministers, and we were afforded the opportunity during the summer to go to Grambling State University and participate in what was called a leadership training school. And I was blessed to be able to go twice to that, and I think it really did help to mold me into a lot of what I am now. I want to tell you about what uh, sparked me to start writing about the history of the Birt family. Her name was, yes, her name was Zola May Hill Butler. Zola May was a cousin on my father's side of the family, and she passed away in 2014 at the ripe old age of 103. My sister, who still lives there in Louisiana close by, called me and told me that she had passed. I didn't know her. I never met her. I had heard of her. I knew many of the siblings because we were the same school age, but I didn't know anything about Zola May. But something kept uh, nagging at me that I needed to take that 200-mile trip and go over there to her funeral. I didn't make up my own mind that I was going to do it until the Wednesday before the funeral, and the funeral was on a Saturday. So I finally just called my sister and said, "Hey, I'm coming over. I'll spend the night with you and go to the funeral with you tomorrow." And that I did. When we got there, uh, I started seeing some of the relatives that I had known before but had kind of lost contact with. And then the program started. I looked at that program and it was like a legacy. Zola May had 2 children, but she had 8 grandchildren. She had 15 great grand and 13 great great grand. I said, wow, that was not the way that a funeral program normally laid out. But what impressed me about it all was that one part of the program was called the Family Charge. And it said, embrace your heritage. The minister, Reverend James Smith, stood up and he started to speak. And the first words out of his mouth were, there is so much of our history in the graveyard because no one took the time to write it down. It was then that I made myself a note and I realized, quite frankly, that's why I was there. That I was going to be the one that would be charged with recording the history of our family. I had done some previous study already at Southern University when I took a class. Well, actually, it wasn't at Southern, it was a graduate school program at Cal State Dominguez Hill, a class called The Family in Perspective. And at that time, I'd done a lot of research and pulled together a lot of information on our family, and I still had some relatives around that could provide some information for me. But this started that path, and I'd like to tell you that I actually had completed that task, but no, I haven't completed. I have done about 16 pages toward it, and it's let's say that it's an ongoing program. Now let's talk a little bit about Ulysses Birt and Sarah Birt, my parents. Um, Very deeply religious folks. My dad was absolutely the king of the household. I mean, you did not challenge him on things because if you did, you'd lose. And he was not one to uh, waste a lot of words. He usually ended up with the paddle in his hand. But anyway, Ulysses Birt, I think he made it through the 8th grade in school, but he could read and write with the best of them. And he kept us focused on the importance of an education. One of his deep rooted things was Ulysses Birt wanted to vote. And at that time, um, blacks were not allowed to vote. And at the point that the door was open, they had to pass a constitution test in order to be able to vote. Well, like I said, he'd made it through the 8th grade, and most of the black families around there did not make it that far. Uh, but Ulysses was going to find a way to vote. So he got involved with a group called the Better Citizens League. And the Better Citizens League met on Sunday afternoons at 4 o'clock at a designated place because it was important that word did not get out about what they were doing. They would get together, and teachers, people who were knowledge of the Constitution, would teach them about the Constitution. And then, as they felt different ones were ready, they were sent down to challenge the test. Well, my dad was one of the first five, I understand, that went down and took the test. And he actually took the test and passed it the first time. And so he then got involved with trying to help teach the others to pass the test. Well, the word got out about what was going on, and an attempt was made on his life. In 1963, I went home from Southern University for Thanksgiving to discover this big bullet hole in the door of Dad's truck, old pickup truck. And it was very clearly it had to be a high powered weapon that did that. So I asked Dad, I said, Dad, what happened? And he said, oh, they tried to kill me. I mean, just matter of factly, oh, they tried to kill me. I understand that there was an investigation and United States Marshals were involved and they investigated, but they came up with nothing. Uh, it was clear that they had some knowledge about who did it, but nothing came of it. But Ulysses Birt got his wish. He voted and he passed, and he helped others to vote as well. Now, my mother was the quiet, assuming, lovable woman in the house. And she ran the house. She ran the house pretty much while Dad got out and did the work. And she was so much involved with us. Everybody, all the children in the community loved my mother. When I was in high school, she was president of the PTA. And she would come to school often and sit in the classroom with me even after I was a junior or senior in high school. Well, I didn't like that very much, but all of my friends loved it because my mom always brought fresh cookies when she visited the classroom. So that's just a little bit about them. Um, then there were two significant events. Now, I'm out of college now. I graduated from college. I got my first teaching job in Southern California in a place called La Puente. Uh, and I was a math teacher there and also did some coaching and later on became department chair for the mathematics department. And after 3 years, actually after 7 years in middle school, I went back to school and got my master's degree in school administration at Cal State Long Beach. And within months, I was hired as an assistant principal at one of the middle schools in the district. Um, Quite an experience there. After 3 years as assistant principal, I became the youngest person to be selected as a principal in that district. The district was, 60, 70% Hispanic. Uh, there was a lot of movement out from the inner Los Angeles area outward because there was affordable housing out there and everything. But I spent my entire career as a as an educator in that school district, Bassett Unified School District, and in which I became a school principal. And at the end of my career, I became assistant superintendent of human resources. After completing that and announcing that I was retiring at the age of 61, I went to work for Azusa Pacific University, mentoring new teachers, a job that I absolutely loved in every way. It was a wonderful, wonderful assignment. One of the great joys of my life was meeting two people who iconic people, um, Dr. Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. I met Dr. Martin Luther King in February of 1968, same year that he was assassinated. He came to my church in Southern California, Holman United Methodist Church, um, and spoke. He was on a mission through that area and had several stops. And the first stop was at Holman United uh, Methodist Church, a very large church, a very beautiful structure, um, a modern type of facility. I had been members of that church for a number of years, sang in the choir there, and when it was announced that Dr. Martin Luther King was coming, the media was there. Everybody was just absolutely packed out. But the important thing, beyond just meeting Dr. King, was the fact that my father was with us at the time. He got a chance to meet his all time idol, Dr. Martin Luther King. And I remember that day so well, everything about it, what we sang, what his message was all about, and that was they sang a song, which referred to the fact that when the slaves of old wanted to communicate, they couldn't do it verbally just by saying, we're going to go somewhere, because they would be found out and severely punished. So to communicate, they sang a song. And when they would sing songs like Steal Away, Steal Away, Steal Away to Jesus, they were saying that there was going to be a meeting, and that they would be a designated place for them to meet so that the masters of the plantation wouldn't find them out and stop them from going to the meeting location. Um, it was just an absolute wonderful experience, uh, spine chilling. And my dad was so happy. He was so excited that he had met his idol. Little did we all know that within 2 months that he would be assassinated. The other person, Rosa Parks, Rosa, um, and I do have. I don't know if you can see it. This is a picture that my family took with Rosa Parks on one of her visits to another church that I belonged to later on after leaving Home United Methodist Church and going to Friendship Baptist Church in Yorba Linda, California. She would come as a part of an arrangement every year and visit that church. And in her earlier years, she would speak, and the men of the church, well, it was about 100 of us that would form a reception line as she came in to the church. And um, I remember so very clearly, every time she would pass my location in that assembly line, tears would simply just roll down my cheek, uh, out of great respect for who she was and what she had accomplished for all of mankind, as a matter of fact. I have an autographed copy of her book, My Story. Uh, and I actually have two copies of it. I intend at some point to leave one of them in the library at my present church, Greater Vision Community Church here in Killeen, Texas. I also have another book here, uh, Bus Ride to Justice, which is written by attorney Fred Gray. And Fred Gray is well known as being the attorney that represented Rosa Parks when she was arrested for not leaving the bus as she was ordered. He was also the attorney for Dr. Martin Luther King. So these are very, very precious treasures that I have in my library here at home. Now, where does all of this lead? Um, after, well, before I went into education, uh, upon graduating from Southern University, went through the ROTC as I shared before, and completed ROTC and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. I did my basic training at Fort um, Sill, Oklahoma, in artillery. And as soon as I got that finished, I was assigned to Fort Gordon, Georgia, training the basic trainees on how to use a hand grenade. And after a year of doing that, then I got orders for Vietnam. And quite an experience. I mean, it was today, it seems like it never happened. I spent 10 months in Vietnam, and the 10th month, my mother passed away in the United States, so they sent me home. And that 5/6 of a tour is considered a full tour. So I did not have to go back, but I did continue with the military for another 9 years in a reserve capacity. Could not stay with it because I was a principal of a school. So, I had to kind of weigh the odds and say, okay, I was meant to be an educator, so I decided instead of going back to the military, that I would stick with education. Uh, my wife, I wanted to say a little bit about her. I've got about I'm right at it. My wife was involved in desegregation of the public schools in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She was one of 13 that was selected um, uh, to integrate the public schools of East Baton Rouge Parish, and she had quite a few experiences there. And after graduating from Glen Oak High School down there, she was selected along with 15 other students to integrate the undergraduate program at Louisiana State University, in which she uh, uh, continued there for 2 years until I came home from Vietnam. We got married and headed off to California. So she completed her education in California and is now, was before she retired, CPA, and still does a lot of that kind of work. But she's very much involved with the NAACP now, the Democratic Party of Bell County here, and our church, our church, and our church. We are very much involved there as a deaconess of my church. I wanted to kind of to end all of this by simply saying that it's been a bumpy road along the way, I think. But as I look back on it, we were such a happy family. It was family that kept, that was the glue that kept all of this together. It was family and our faith that somehow things were going to work out just fine. And I think as you look at you talk about success, it takes many forms for many people. But I think the most successful thing that you can have is a happy life. I want to thank again my folks out there at CDC and especially Cynthia. You've been a marvel. I just appreciate you so much, even though I just met you just recently. But being a Louisiana girl and that smile, it just means the world to me. Thank you for inviting me to do this, and I will cherish it for the rest of my life. Thank you very much.
Oh my gosh, Mr. Birt, you are so wonderful. You are so wonderful. I let me ask Lee. Lee, do you have any comments or any questions for Mr. Birt from
Um,
audience?
there are no questions at the moment.
Okay, all righty. Well, Mr. Birt, your story was inspiring, fascinating. I knew you were going to be a great storyteller. and to follow your life from where it started. And I remember those very small communities, one room schoolhouse communities,
Mm-hmm.
and to become so high up in education, to be a supervisor, to be a principal. uh, you've done so much, and look at this wonderful smile. You have a spirit. I've only met you in what, the last 3 or 4 weeks, and you just bring joy to me every time I speak with you, and you and your wife. And I love the fact that you guys have been married for 54 years, right?
Mhm. That's right.
And you're still happy.
You the happy are you no?
Oh, well, sir, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And if you would like to put any type of website
Mm.
for our viewers, your church
Mm.
or your
Mhm.
business or your just who you are,
Mhm.
we can go ahead and put it in our comments for our community. I think
Okay.
our community is learning so much
Mm.
about the rich, wonderful people that we have here in our Killeen area, Bell County area.
Mhm.
And you have made, just an amazing story, and you have given such a gift to the community, not only here in Killeen, but to our students around the world. So thank you very much.
Thank
And
you. Thank you for
thank
the
your
opportunity.
children for getting you all set up with your camera. Thank your wife, Mrs. Birt, for getting him on time. Is she going to wave to us before we go? Is that a yes
Oh
or a
yeah.
no? I don't see her in the picture.
No, no, she's somewhere in the house taking
She's
care of
done.
something.
She's
Yeah,
done with us.
yeah.
All right. Well, sir, don't go away. And Lee's going to go ahead and take us out of this one.
Okay.
And for everyone, don't forget that tomorrow we have
Yes.
two more speakers. Hi. We have two more speakers, one at noon, one at 1. And then on Thursday, we have another speaker, one
Uh-huh.
at noon and one at 1. So we're just going to continue on this wonderful life story series.
All
So
right.
thank you again, guys, and we
Thank you.
hopefully will see you tomorrow at noon. So,
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
all
Thank you
right.
so very much. Okay.
Okay, don't
All
leave
right.
yet, Mr. Burt.
Okay.